How do we harness modern technology to truly touch lives, especially when addressing the silent epidemic of social isolation in our aging population? Today, I am privileged to introduce to you my colleague, but also my friend, Kyle Rand. He is the CEO of Rendever, a visionary who took personal inspiration from his grandparents' experiences and turned them into a revolutionary solution. Drawing from his extensive research at Duke University on neuroprosthetics and the intricate workings of the aging brain, Kyle founded Rendever, an award-winning virtual reality platform. From Forbes 30 Under 30 and recognition on the Times list of 100 most influential companies. This groundbreaking innovation isn't just tech for tech's sake, it is a beacon of hope, reducing social isolation and bringing the vast expanse of the outside world to older adults, irrespective of their physical boundaries. As we visit today, we talk about our time at CES and just the momentum and the recognition and the excitement that we felt in our observations. We also uncover the heart and the science behind Rendever, the stories from senior living communities and family caregivers and older adults, and the ripple effects that this platform is creating in reshaping the future of care. You don't want to miss this conversation as we talk about the journey of our emotions and the intersection of technology, empathy, and human connection. Here is my interview with Kyle Rand. All right, here we go.
Hi.
Hello. I'm so excited about this. Kyle, when we met, I told you, I was like, I have reserved this podcast platform to not do any other VR companies because I wanted Rendever and I wanted us to have a conversation. So thank you. The day's
Ugh,
here.
Nicole, I love that. And I'm so excited for this conversation. We're going to talk about so many fun things and meaningful
I
things.
know. I think so too. And we were just together at CES. We had the best time. It was so fun to not only be like inspired by all of these people around us. I think you and I both felt that we're like, it's so invigorating.
Mhm.
How I want to hear, like, what are your thoughts? CES, what did you do? What did you see? All the things.
So I think the most amazing thing, I don't know if you know this, but we've been working with AARP since 2018,
Wow.
maybe even since 2017.
Okay.
But the first time we went to CES with them was 2009. Oh gosh. Was it 2018 or 2019? This was our sixth CES, so do
Okay.
the math. I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
would make it 2018 was the first
I
year.
think so. I'm like,
Uh,
my brain, I can't think. Yeah.
there was a week in Vegas that just happened. But so
Right.
we were there the very first year that they were there. And the booth back then was 400 square feet, which for senior living friends who are listening, like that's a pretty normal size, honestly, on the big size of a booth.
Hmm.
This year it was 13,000 square
Wow.
feet. And so we've seen this ecosystem grow year over year over year. And the whole time I was at CES, I was just floored by what felt like magic at
Mm.
the Age Tech Collaborative
Yeah.
booth. Like there's so many really amazing people who are looking at age tech, right? We had visits from the Microsoft CEO. We had like really, really famous people coming through. We had
Yeah.
probably the largest number of investors making an appearance at that booth. And, the Age Tech After Dark pitch event was amazing. And having been through so many years of CES with them, I was just sitting there being like, it is finally really coming together. Like,
Yeah.
this is a real ecosystem that's
Mhm.
built. And I don't know, I think that's the most amazing and inspiring thing.
Yeah, I agree. I thought the same thing. It was not having been before, actually. I wasn't sure what to expect. So, walking in to see the presence that they had, to see the level of excellence and the caliber of the panels and the people coming through. I got to meet the head of Samsung Health. Howie Mendel was there, on the pronto and sharing, and
As a
just, I
hologram,
know, I know. And
who would
Guy,
have thought?
yeah. And Guy Raz, who I've listened to How I Built This for years. And I actually
Yeah.
saw him speak live in Minneapolis and do a How I Built This show with Angie, and I don't remember her last name, but with Angie's Popcorn. And so just seeing all the people that were present and giving that space its due was
Mm.
just so encouraging. And the momentum, I think we all felt that energy, like you were saying. It kind of felt magical, the momentum there.
It really did. And then I don't know if you know this, Nicole, but while I was there, I also, for the first time ever, put on my podcast host hat. And
What?
so me and Tanya Perkins from Tembo Health co-hosted a podcast where we interviewed a bunch of the startup founders at the Age Tech Collaborative
No
booth.
way.
And it was the first time I was sitting in your seat.
Yay.
And it was a challenge. Like it's so different to answer questions.
Hmm.
Um, but it was also like one of the most magical things. Like I love getting the chance to talk to other founders in any setting.
Right.
But the way we approached that podcast was we wanted to have really authentic conversations, right? Society loves to glorify entrepreneurship,
Right.
but the reality is it's really, really hard.
Oh, that's so true.
And so being able to have founders sitting down with other founders, just talking about the hard stuff and talking about the realities of what it takes to go from an idea to a product that gets to
Right.
have a showcase at CES was a really refreshing way to start the year. There was just a
Oh,
lot of honesty and truth.
it's so true. What a cool lens, too, because you could probably pull out and understand and have empathy for what those founders are going through, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so where can we hear these podcasts? I want to go check them out.
Ooh, that is a really good question. So right now, I think they're only getting broadcast within the Age Tech Collaborative ecosystem,
Got it.
and we're
Okay.
trying to figure out where it goes next.
Okay.
So you
Sounds good.
you know I'll be
TBD.
reaching out.
Yeah.
Yeah, TBD.
TBD. That's so fun. Well, it was just such a joy to celebrate all of you. And for me, it was fun. I got to meet like how many of my podcast guests in person and then re-amplify their work, which I found, okay, so the podcast now that I have is it's almost like I feel like I'm building this community because my guests become friends in some cases, and podcasts are evergreen, so they live on. So I'm constantly able to re-highlight and share, and depending on what's happening in your world, pull that out to be able to like shine a light on, okay, here's all the good work that's happening. So yeah, it was just another opportunity to do that. It was
I love
so
that. Yeah, I
fun.
think you had said that Matt Golden from Map Habit was a
Yes.
previous guest, right? And he was on stage at the Age Tech Collaborative After Dark pitch event.
Yep.
And what I love about the whole ecosystem is like everybody is finding success in their own ways. Like
Mm,
Matt has an amazing track record with NIA funding. I actually looked to him and asked him some questions as we were getting ready for our last round of NIA funding.
yeah.
And like other people have done these things, other people have done these things, and a good community. And
Right.
it's like that's what matters,
Yeah.
right? That's what we both love. A good
Yeah.
community is able to bring those successes together to help lift each other up.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that was definitely on full display last week.
Totally. Yes, that's so true. You're right. It's like we pull from the success of the people around us and can learn, right? And ask each other. It was like Zinnia, who was also there. I've had them look at my pitch deck before, right? Because they've had to go through that with investors. And while I'm not looking for investment, I have a pitch in another way. But it was that whole idea of like, how can we give insight and support and just, yeah, we all rise together, which is, I love that that's our lens. And I think we find each other, right? The people that feel that way totally find each other.
And the best part about like the overall either senior living ecosystem or age tech ecosystem or aging services ecosystem is we all have this why that connects us,
Yeah.
right? We all want to make the life of caregivers easier. We all want to make the aging process easier. And ideally for all of us, also more fun, right? Something that we can all look forward to as we ourselves get older.
Right, right. Oh, so true. I'm just gonna like soak up all your wisdom. But I want people to know you. Like I've had the opportunity and the great pleasure to spend time in your space. But for people listening, the family caregivers listening, you have a personal story that really influenced what you studied, your career, starting Rendever. And I want to hear a little bit more about that so we can understand, you really come to this from a very personal, passionate place.
Yeah. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of people end up doing this kind of stuff because of those personal things. Definitely happy to give a little bit of my background. So I grew up in upstate New York. And as a kid, I used to go and I used to volunteer at a senior living community. And the senior living community specifically had an ice cream parlor. So me and my friends would go in and we would scoop ice cream for older adults. And I think it was that kind of early exposure, not only that helped me like really build a relationship with the aging process, but also helped me understand that at that age, and I pause because I don't really think it's at that age. I think it's at every age. It's the little things that matter.
Yeah.
And I always go back to this moment where a gentleman walked into the ice cream parlor and I locked eyes with him. And I pointed at him. I was like, I know you want rum raisin with chocolate sprinkles. And the like smile that spread across his face from that little moment of
Right.
recognition and human connection,
Mm-hmm.
like has stuck with me ever since. And so I don't know. I think those moments just really matter and they really compound. And then I ended up going to school. I was going to be an engineer, and then I took an intro to neuroscience class and fell in love with it. I think the brain
Wow.
is fascinating. I still think the brain is fascinating. And unfortunately, my college career was bookended by losing both of my grandmothers. So
Sorry.
freshman year, I
Yeah.
lost my grandma on my mom's side really suddenly to a
Mm.
heart condition. And then my senior year, my grandma on my dad's side was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Mm.
And this woman, like growing up, she was only an hour away. We would go there like and see her probably every other week, and she would spend a lot of time with us and was just amazing. Like, she was the dean of nursing at Ithaca College. She was a brain cancer survivor.
Wow.
She did so much and she accomplished so much. And she was just through all of it, always had a smile on her face. And so then when she started going through her second kind of cancer progression, I saw just how tough the process
Mm-hmm.
was, and not just tough on her. There was a set of influences. She eventually moved into a senior living community. She also had chemo, and I think cognitive decline set in pretty quickly. And it didn't just impact her, but seeing just how much it impacted our family, right? She moved in
Yeah.
with my aunt and my uncle. My aunt was also battling cancer. So care coordination became
Right.
really just impossible. And then like you started to see the phrase in the relationship, and then that spread out to other members of the family. And by the end of it, I think everybody was just so exhausted and so overwhelmed, and the relationships needed to be stitched back together. And I think once anybody goes through a moment like that, you just want to change
Right.
all of it. And you
Yeah.
just want to make it all better for everybody. And I think the number one thing that I've learned over the past 10 years is that the aging process is the definition of a multi-stakeholder
Mm.
process, approach, etc. There's
Yeah.
so many people who get involved with the care for someone as they get older, and each of them have a different set of needs. Each of them have a different set of like emotional attachment that needs to be navigated, and all of it can create so much complexity, but at the same time it can create so many beautiful opportunities. And as a society, we need to help cultivate those beautiful opportunities because that makes everything else easier.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know families are sitting here going, he sees me.
Mm,
He, like having you share that and all of those complexities, right, and emotions that we go through when we are caring for someone. And there's something so special about that. Like, as hard as it is, I think having someone know us and know what we're going through gives us that courage to move on. We're not alone. You know, a lot of families will say like they just feel so alone in it. But we know
mm,
with the data that they're not, right? You know, 53 million other unpaid family caregivers. And having your words and companies that can surround us with that support is really meaningful. So, and
totally.
how you do that with your support with Rendever. I want you to talk about that. But for people that are listening that have no idea what VR is or Rendever, right?
Mm.
Like, what is VR? How would you describe it?
Oh, there's
I
so many
know.
ways to
I know.
describe it. I think, what we like to talk about at Rendever is we're really in the business of creating magic and
Mm,
using magic to help resubstantiate human relationships. And I say resubstantiate really within the lens of caregivers. So I'll talk about that in a minute.
yeah.
But for those who are listening who have never tried VR, really, these headsets, you put them on and you can go anywhere in the world and you can do anything. And when we got started back in 2016, the whole like consumer VR ecosystem was really quite new, right? New York Times, I think, had just
Mm-hmm.
sent out a bunch of Google Cardboard headsets in quotation marks where you would unfold it and like make this kind of box shape, then put your phone into it and hold it up to your face and go swimming with dolphins. And it was cool because it was like mass market moment where everybody experienced the idea of an immersive headset for the first time. But at the same time, those headsets are not what headsets are today. Like a
Right.
lot of people probably got motion sickness or nauseous because the set of sensors that you need to really make a fluid immersive experience just weren't there. Today, that's totally different, right? There's
Yeah.
some really amazing headsets, but the nature and the opportunity and the purpose hasn't really changed. Really, those headsets, you can open up somebody's entire world.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they're physically limited, even if they're cognitively limited and they're confined to maybe four walls, with this headset, they could go anywhere. They could go travel the world. They could experience new things. They can check off bucket list items. One of the things that we love most is they can actually get really immersive reminiscence therapy. So you can go back to someone's childhood home or back to, the streets of the neighborhood that they grew up in and walk them around. And through all of these experiences, what happens is you get these moments of joy
Yeah.
and these sparks of excitement and these stories that get shared because you're in a fully immersive environment. And what we do is we train the people who deliver Rendever to take those sparks, take those moments, and cultivate them into something more, right? If you can get three people to say wow together, then one person to share a story, and then everybody to start sharing stories, you go from a moment of like, cool, this is cool
Mm-hmm.
technology, to a moment of real human connection.
Right.
And for all older adults and for all people who are caring for older adults, that's the hardest thing. It's how do we find that human connection
Yeah.
on a consistent basis?
Yeah.
And so what we've done is we've really made that technology accessible and connection oriented and
That,
magic.
oh my gosh, I know the magic. You're right. And what is so cool you were sharing about, it's something we can experience individually, but collectively, when you do that with whether it's a care partner or a group of other older adults, the conversation that can happen, the connection that's fostered. I think, from my lens of talking and working with families, they struggle sometimes with knowing how do I connect to my loved one, right? We're in this care partner dynamic, and so we're needing to show up in ways that are in that, we're caring for them, we're doing those activities of daily living, and we miss out on what other conversation can we have, or in what other ways can we pull out joy from each other, right? And so, how
Mhm.
amazing that there's a tool that can really do that and foster that.
Totally. And I think what you just mentioned is so critical. The more what we've always known and what we've seen time and time again is the more somebody is really taking care of the individual,
Mm-hmm.
the less they get to focus on their relationship.
Right.
And so one of the things, you know this, but for people listening,
Yeah.
primarily up until recently, we've really only been working with senior living communities. Like we have a large wait list of consumers who have wanted to bring this into their home environment for their family members, but we really started in senior living.
Yeah.
And there's a number of reasons for that. But what we just did is we just finished our first clinical trial funded by the National Institute on Aging. And it's too early to really share results, but I can share some of the phase one results. The way we structured this clinical trial was to enable individuals who are living in senior living communities and specifically those with cognitive decline. So we were looking at the spectrum of mild cognitive impairment through moderate dementia, where we know at that point in the process, right, that a lot of relationships may end up being quite
Mm-hmm.
frayed. And so we allowed them to connect with their family members who are living at a distance. And just by connecting in this virtual environment, this virtual shared space, people would come together. They would sit on a virtual couch in a virtual family room,
Oh,
sitting next to each other's avatars. They would then go explore the world. They would look at old family photos and old family videos in the virtual TV, in the virtual family room, or they would go do these reminiscence therapy journeys. We saw statistically significant improvements in multiple mental health scores, both
wow.
on the resident and on the family member. And specifically, when we were looking at the family member, we saw statistically significant decreases in caregiver guilt
Mm,
and caregiver stress, and collectively, of course, just caregiver burden. And our whole hypothesis around this and why we're continuing to go down this path is that the reality is, even after you've moved a loved one into a senior living community, even after
mhm.
you've brought in any form of outside help, for most people, the time from when you start providing caregiving needs to that moment of transition is full of stress. It's full of complexity. It's full of like navigation. And that burden raises a lot.
Yeah,
And if you never get the moment to reset, and to say, okay, I have this outside help in. Now I want to dive in and I want to refocus on the relationship. How do I do that?
right.
What Rendever did in those moments was it provided a structured way to really rebuild the connection. And so, even for these secondary family caregivers who are no longer providing active care, they were able to remove the like existing burden and just rebuild the relationship. And that's why we think that we saw those improvements.
Goodness. I'm so encouraged by that. And it's exactly what families need and are looking for. So anything I can do to elevate in that family caregiver world that they know, it's available. And I'm sure people had reached out and said, we want this in our home, right? We want this with our loved one. So the fact that
Nicole,
that's happening, yeah.
literally since day one, we have gotten our website is designed for senior living. But we've always had an opportunity for like family members to reach out to ask for it for Rendever.
Hmm.
And the number of people who have reached out and just opened up into this form on this website about their needs and about how like they are craving people are craving the opportunity to experience joy and experience happiness, not just for themselves but for the person that they're caring for.
Right.
And we've gotten so many just emotional stories that literally have made me cry.
Hmm.
That for a while we built up this program called Expanding Impact, where we would just allow people to apply and then we would ship them a Rendever system
Thank
for free
goodness.
just to start
Wow.
really testing
Hmm.
the model in the market. And now that we have this clinical research, we're really starting to open the doors for others. And I can't wait, because it's like the hardest thing as a founder is that you're always told you have to focus, you have
Yeah.
to focus, you have to focus. But when you have people knocking at your door saying they need your solution, it's so hard to
Right.
navigate that like tightrope balance.
I'm
And I can't
sure.
wait for more people to experience the magic of Rendever.
Yeah, I'm sure. I bet you're just like, I want to just give it to all the people now, but there is that process, right? And due
Yeah.
diligence, which is so appreciated. When you were sharing about, we think of older adults as having, they need the support because typically they've got some constraints with mobility or cognition and things like that. And in the worlds that VR can open up for them in Rendever. I
Mhm.
think something as you were sharing about that, a lot of caregivers feel really stuck and isolated in their caregiving role. While
Mhm.
they need to be home with their loved one, they are caring for them, 24/7 most of the time if they're that full time family caregiver. And even if not, there's still a large undertaking with that.
Mhm.
With their feeling that way, this also opens up a world of exploration and excitement and adventure for them in ways while they're in this season of life, right? So
Yeah.
not only benefits that connection, but it gives them a window on the world that they aren't able to experience at that moment.
Oh my gosh, you are so right. Right? The ability to go on vacation is
Hmm.
hard when you're in that role.
Hmm.
And often money can also get stretched
Right.
quite thin,
Yeah.
right? Which makes it even harder. And the ability to go anywhere and experience new things,
Yeah.
I think can do so much for somebody.
Right, right. So, one thing as you were sharing about, okay, you've been in senior living, historically, moving into working with families, there's a whole conversation I think you and we were looking forward to having about how family caregivers, kind of their lens on senior living versus aging in place, right? Keeping their loved one at home. what that looks like, what you're seeing in this field, and yeah, some of those misconceptions. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to diving in about this one.
Oh my gosh. I know we both have
Yeah.
so many thoughts and experiences that inform our opinions. And
Hmm.
I think, maybe the way we can start is we can just look at the facts,
Yeah.
right? I think AARP just published an updated study that showed, or maybe it was a survey that showed that 90% of older adults in the US prefer to age in place.
Hmm.
And senior living is a large market, but they only make up 10% of the population.
Yeah.
And so when you think about senior living and then expanding into the at home,
Right.
there's so many more people that you can impact, which is why I'm excited.
Mm.
The reality is that for those 90% of individuals who prefer to age in place, the likelihood that they fall prey to the trap of social isolation is astronomical.
Yeah.
Right. It happens even in senior living communities, which is why we focus there first. It's like we have people who are living next to each other, they're sitting next to each other, they're
Hmm.
having meals next to each other. Why are they not forming relationships? Let's start there. Let's actually
Right.
prove that we can fix and form relationships in that market first.
Right.
And now as we look to the aging in place population, we just have to recognize, and for family caregivers, I think it's really important that we recognize just how dangerous social isolation is. If you look at the stats, I think the one that's most alarming that I'm sure everyone has heard at this point is that prolonged social isolation is as detrimental to one's health as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. A really, really dangerous place to be. And it ties to really wide range of comorbidities. We're talking about a 30% increase in risk of heart disease and stroke. We're talking about anywhere from a 30 to 50% increase in risk of dementia. It has ties to diabetes. It has ties to depression and anxiety, but even risk of suicide. And collectively, it leads to a 30% increase in mortality rates.
Mm.
And I think that's why clearly the US Surgeon General last year named it as the next big epidemic that we really have to solve for. And so while there's a lot of comfort to be found at home, we have to be proactive about helping people build community. And that's why I think it's so interesting. I want to kind of reset the way people think about senior living. Of course, the old school stereotypical nursing home has to go. And a lot of people, a lot of modern operators have gotten rid of that model. Like
Right.
you walk into most of these senior living communities today, you're not going to see something that you might have expected. And that's great, right? And
Yeah.
it's taken a lot of time to get there. And I think, unfortunately, there's still just this conception that senior living is that old school nursing home. And that's not the case.
Totally, yeah. But you're right. I hear, families will talk in groups or support groups, and they're like, their lens is how it was maybe 30 years ago when they visited grandma, and it's totally different. Totally different. Yeah.
Totally different
Hmm.
because good operators know this, right?
Right.
That they hear from plenty of family members that they don't want to move into that old school nursing home. They want their loved one to have an opportunity to really live. And I think we're already seeing consolidation in the senior living industry. I
Hmm.
think we're going to continue seeing it where the operators that are shifting the framework of senior living are the ones that are going to end up making it and coming out on top.
I agree. Yeah, the vibrancy, right? And creating communities that foster, you just said the word, purpose,
Yeah.
life, things that we can engage with and interact with, and moments of gathering, and that just pulling out the best of what our interests are, or learning new things, right? Opportunities to do that.
Purpose, thriving,
Hmm.
gathering, things
Hmm.
that senior living can exceed at
Hmm.
that can be really hard to cultivate at
Oh
home.
my gosh, yes.
But that's where technology has the opportunity to come in and play a role.
For sure. Are you finding that operators are open to the idea of the new technologies and innovation? I'm sure you had, when you first started, this uphill battle a little bit of changing the methodology. And as we heard, I don't know if you were listening to that panel with the CEO of Asbury Communities and Argentum, and they self-admittedly felt that senior living moves at a very slow pace. So, from your experience on that, what are you seeing in the
Man, I
adoption?
am I am sitting here nodding along vigorously to everything that you're saying.
Right, right.
And in the beginning, again, you have to recognize when Rendever was starting, consumer VR as a whole was pretty new. Like that
Right.
New York Times experience was most people's first thing. And then a month later, you have these kids coming in being like, VR, we're
Hmm.
seniors, we got this. And we were definitely laughed at a few times. And what we learned quite quickly was that this industry needs validation
Mm,
and this industry needs evidence. And
right.
so we were quick. We did our first study with MIT Age Lab during year one, and then we've kept on a clinical research program. We've done a number of studies. We have a number of publications at this point, and we're continuing to invest in that. And all of that work is important, not just for senior living communities, but for everybody,
Yeah.
right? In general, if you're going to look at a product, you really want to understand the impact. Um, and so, honestly, it was a good thing. It
Yeah.
really forced us down this road, and we've benefited quite a lot. I would say today, and this is one of the silver linings of the pandemic, there was no real other solution outside of technology
Mm,
to effectively navigate the pandemic, right? People were stuck in their rooms. People didn't have that sort of in-person interaction. People didn't get to spend time with their families. And we saw a huge uptick in tech spending during the pandemic. And I think what that ultimately did was it catalyzed going from talking about tech to, okay, we actually need to do something.
right.
And I'm starting to see, in my perspective, a number of senior living operators who are no longer just talking the talk. It's so easy to talk the talk. It's one of probably the biggest issues in our industry is we all talk so
All
much.
right.
But
Action. We need
actually,
action. Yeah.
we need action. We actually need to start walking the walk, and we actually
Mhm.
need to start changing. And I think, the two silver linings from the pandemic, from my perspective, are that senior living has changed quite a bit and is
Mhm.
continuing down that path. And everybody, no matter who you are, understands just how hard social isolation is.
Yeah.
And so we all have empathy for what it means to be stuck alone day in and day out and know that we need to make sure that nobody, no matter your age, ends up in that position.
Right. Yeah. And you're right. That really highlighted it for all of us, the extreme levels of isolation that took place during that time. But then it shined a light on that exists. And then how do we do better? And to your point, I think, yeah, the pace is slow, but I think now that there's an awareness on it, people are putting resource towards it in ways that they hadn't before. So, yeah. And
Yeah.
one thing I really value about you and Rendever is there is the data and there is the initiatives taking place and wanting to put statistics in the hands of people, like you said, not only because it validates the offering, but it is validating for the good it can do in the lives of the people that we serve, right? And we want to know, we want to quantify, okay, if I'm investing in this, not only will I feel better, but there's real reasons behind why, because of the data shows that.
100%. And I think it's so easy. And I know that there are a number of older individuals, even in my own life, who have said, like, senior living, that's just where you go to die.
Mm,
And I think for family members and for everybody to understand, the business of senior living is fueled by longevity.
right.
And so when someone moves into a senior living community, the operator's goal and their why and their own purpose
For
is
sure.
to help those individuals age better and
Yeah.
age for longer.
Yeah.
And to be a family caregiver, feeling like you're alone, to then be able to bring in a team that really is incentivized, but also designed around helping people live better and
Yeah.
live longer. There's so much opportunity there, and I think that's one of those misconceptions that, like,
Hmm.
it's hard to navigate.
Yeah.
It's hard to navigate, and
Yeah.
I'll share from the other side. My own grandfather, he's my last remaining grandparent.
Hmm.
He just turned 95. He lives alone in Long Island, New York. He loves VR. He loves Rendever,
Mm,
truly. And I we were having a conversation with him. I bring up senior living a fair amount just because I'm always interested in hearing his shifting perspective on it,
yeah.
and hearing my own family members shifting perspective on it too. And there's one comment that he made to my mom that will stick with me forever.
Mm.
And when talking about senior living, what he said was that he doesn't want to leave his home because his home is his last remaining friend.
Mm. Wow.
And that just added such a perspective that I never would have thought of. Like I understand not wanting to leave your home, but feeling like it's one of the last tangible threads
Mm.
that connects you to the entire life that you've built.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to take away from somebody. And that's where I think there's an opportunity to really blend the walls between what it means to age in place and what it means to have access to community.
Right.
And that's where we have to like really start moving,
Yeah.
not just senior living, like all of us.
Yeah. I'm so glad you shared that. And I hadn't thought of it in that way before. And so now I'm
Right?
like, as you were sharing, I'm like nodding my head. I can't imagine that, feeling of it's like that last touch point to the life well lived
Mm,
previously. And then when we let that go, it's kind of that acknowledgement of we're saying goodbye to that and we're
yeah.
moving on. And for some people, they welcome that goodbye to moving on. But for a lot of us, that is keeping us close to tradition, family, memories, all the things
Memories.
that are really important. Yeah.
Yeah, my grandpa's house is full of photos of
Hmm.
life, decades of life all over his wall, and he gets to experience that
Yeah.
all the time. And he
Yeah.
has plenty of wall space to experience it within, which
Right.
of course would change if he was to downsize in any way.
Right. Yeah. I feel too there's a conversation that I've started to have more frequently, and I think it's important how families really still view themselves as a caregiver, even though their loved one moves into a community. In senior living, I believe that some of the perspective is once your loved one moves in, we've got it. You can be daughter again. And the reality is, families still feel the oversight of legal, financial, medical, doctor's appointments. Sometimes we're still providing groceries and supplies and that companionship, right?
Mhm.
So understanding the maybe role that families are still in or that they feel that they're in, and how do we support them? And then how do families still connect with their loved ones when they can't be there all the time, right? And VR is another opportunity and way to do that. So it's just a very interesting intersection of do we support family caregivers in the way that we can within senior living, right? And
Mhm.
acknowledging that, but also supporting families in the community that maybe aren't ready to make that move yet, but just how important it is to be that source of guidance and information and resource because we in that ecosystem have the typically the educational background, right? The passion. You had
Mhm.
shared so brilliantly about how, we've got the infrastructure in senior living to provide some of these support systems. So I just think it's going to be really interesting to see how we merge the care economy and all that's happening in that world with senior living and how
Nicole,
that's coming together.
you bring up so many good points, and I'm really curious on your thoughts on this. What has always stood out to me in the senior living transition process
Mm-hmm.
is that, and the industry as a whole, there are so many tools, products, services focused on the operational side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, this is all the paper you're going to fill. This is the legal. This is like how you think about POAs. Like, let's talk about all of the non-emotional logistical
Right.
sides of making that transition. And I think what really matters to family members, sure, that has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely has to happen for the senior living operator. But what really matters to family members is the emotional side of it.
Right.
And I don't know if where we stand today, any senior living company
Mm-hmm.
really has figured out how to
Mm-hmm.
make the emotional transition
Right.
seamless.
Right. I agree. I agree. I've started putting out into the universe my thoughts on. I think it would be super cool if large operators would almost have like a fractional executive family caregiver advocacy position
Hmm.
where that person would really be the curator of all that's happening for families, all of the age tech that could support them, all of the resources, and start to be the guide 10, 20 years prior to move in, and then available for when they're, living in communities, but how to build those relationships. Because as we know from data, I think it might have been, was it Smash put out some numbers around when families move in or they decide to choose a community, more often than not, it's based on that personal referral or recommendation, right?
Mhm.
So how do we do that? We do that while by being in relationship with people so that they want to share the work that's happening. They feel connected to the culture, to the environment, to the initiatives that are taking place. I don't know, I'm just going off the cuff here, but I think that there's a lot of interesting dynamics that I think could be really exciting to see play out.
I 100% agree. And
Yeah,
like my big request for the industry is that we really make the emotional side more of a conversation,
right.
right? And not so much a conversation on like, oh, how do we secure this new person, but
Mm-hmm.
how do we really make it feel like somebody wants to move into senior living? Because I think the moment we can transition into having an individual say, yes, that is the community for me, rather than
Right.
the family member finally getting to the point that, like, okay, great, this transition can happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it'll be easier for the family caregivers. It'll be easier for the senior living staff. It'll be a more welcome transition for the
Mm-hmm.
individual. And I think what that comes down to is really focusing on the emotional side.
Yeah.
And where I hope this industry goes is allowing prospects and allowing people who are aging in place currently
Mm-hmm.
to start building relationships with their senior living community 18 months ahead of time, just in pure spending time together. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we're focused on for the future of Rendever. It's, obviously getting someone from their home to a community can be a lot. The activation energy is quite high. So
Yeah.
with VR, what we've proven is that we can allow people to take these virtual spaces together and actually show that relationships are able to grow in that way. And so if we
Amazing.
can start to cultivate that community feel, I think the transition won't feel so much like you're leaving life behind. It's you're
Totally.
stepping into a new chapter that you're ready for. And I know that's aspirational, but I think
Yeah.
ultimately that's what we all need.
Yeah, I see it. I see it. I think it's so important and oh my gosh, that's so cool. It's so true. And there is something to be said about when we support people's emotional health and think of what that does and think of like the bridges that are connected through that. There's a lot around family caregivers in terms of they just want to feel heard. And I think if we can understand the emotional journey that families are on and connect to that and the
Mhm.
older adults, just like what you said and how you do that to bring them into that new environment, is going to be a lot more enjoyable for everyone involved. Yeah, for everyone involved.
We shift to talking about life. We shift to talking about community. We shift to
Yeah,
talking about social connection.
yeah,
We shift to really feeling what it can mean to thrive
yeah,
and to live with purpose.
yeah.
And then everything else comes
Oh my
naturally.
gosh,
But
it's
if
so
we don't
true.
focus on that, everything's going to feel hard. It's going to
Yeah.
continue.
So true. So, how are you hopeful? What is the role that you see VR playing in, family caregiving and older adults evolving? And I want to give you the opportunity to share about Alcove and the
Mm.
different ways that you show up in community for people.
I think the opportunity that VR provides more than any other technology ever will is the ability to feel like you are present with somebody else with really remarkably low activation energy. We can talk about driving and transporting and getting people to where they need to be. That feels hard. And for a family caregiver, that always feels hard. Even during the senior living sales process,
Mhm.
having to coordinate tours and go from community to community to community, like it all is hard. And what VR does is it allows you to be somewhere else from the comfort of your own home.
Yeah.
And so you can start to really bridge a lot of different gaps and break down a lot of physical boundaries in how people experience the world. And I think that that will allow the future of community to be different, not
Right.
just for seniors. I think it really will be true for everybody. Like
Hmm.
I look at my own grandpa, again, he's 95 years old and he lives alone and he has 7 children, a majority of which have since left New York State. A
Mm.
lot of them are like ready to step into their own chapters of life, right? Retirement and warmer weather and the like.
Mhm.
And I see the need for each of them. I see the opportunity for each of them to have their own VR headset and then to come together and really spend time together where it feels like they're sitting down next to each other, having those conversations, going and doing the kind of traveling that is key for retirement life, but doing so in an accessible way where my grandpa can also partake, and then coming back onto those virtual couches and looking at each other. And I know some people might listen to that and hear that and be like, no way, that's nonsense, that's science fiction. But again, we have clinical research showing the benefit for mental health, showing the benefit for depression, showing the benefit for better human relationships. And it all comes back down to if everybody has an opportunity to spend time together in VR, whether or not it's through Rendever, whether or not it's through Alcove, which anybody can go and download from the Meta Oculus ecosystem right now, they can come together and they can share moments and they can share magic. And through that, they can really spend time focused on the relationship. And to bring it all home, like that is ultimately what matters for all of us.
It is that human connection. We crave it. We do. I know that this is going to be a big part of our life and our future. We are already seeing it play out, and I can't think of anyone better to champion that cause. And just honored to have you as a guest and in my life, and just so thankful for you and your voice in this space. You make us all better. Thank you.
The gratitude goes both ways, and I would add also thankful that you are my friend.
Thank you. I agree. Thank you. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.